right, we are rolling and start. Due to the rising threat of Russia's foreign policy and willingness to disregard the sovereignty of Ukraine, NATO should extend an offer of membership to both Finland and Sweden in order to prevent further Russian expansion and possible ensuing wars. My first contention is that the war in Ukraine puts Russia in a dangerous position in global foreign relations, giving the democratic nations of the world an opportunity to show strength against such an oppressive foe. Despite an overwhelming advantage in terms of military might, Russia has struggled to gain ground in the war for Ukraine. Their initial goal was to oust the government of Ukraine from its capital of Kiev. However, due to strong Ukrainian resistance, they are rethinking their strategy. 5 weeks into the war, Russia is pulling back roughly 20% of its troops from the areas around the Ukrainian capital of Kiev and appears to be ramping up military operations in the eastern Donbas region, according to NPR. The war itself highlights Russia's foreign policy as a threat to sovereign nations around the world. Previously neutral countries have cut ties with Russia and offered support to Ukraine. For example, Sweden sent thousands of weapons and $50 million in funding directly to the Ukrainian military, despite being neutral historically. And Finland as well pledged to deliver 2,500 assault rifles, 150,000 cartridges, 1,500 single-shot anti-tank weapons, and 70,000 combat ration packages to Ukraine, as well as Switzerland, who cut off all of their banking relations with Russia. This is all according to Axios News. This threat has forced many European countries to pour funding into their militaries as well. According to Breaking Defense, Germany, Belgium, Romania, Italy, Poland, Norway, and Sweden have all pledged to increase defense spending since Russia's invasion of Ukraine began. Not only is this causing strife outside of Russia, it's also causing conflict inside. Russian citizens have also protested against the war, leading to an internal struggle over what is propaganda and what is the truth. According to OVD Info, an independent media project that has been monitoring human rights in Russia for more than a decade, 15,000 people have been detained for protesting the war in over 100 Russian cities since it broke out last month. We need to use this opportunity to set the precedent for countries who seek similar goals to Russia. As is known, China is a partner of Russia economically, and they may govern similarly. They have differing ideologies in many ways. However, Russia's proximity and relationship to Ukraine is similar to that of China and Taiwan. As a representative of United Democratic Nations, NATO must enforce that any country who seeks to disregard another country's sovereignty will be met with strict punishment. My second contention is that although efforts have been made to resolve the conflict between Russia and Ukraine peacefully, Russia has proved that they are willing to continue their extreme measures, and thus extreme measures need to be taken against them. Despite many countries not offering direct support of Ukraine due to not wanting to escalate the conflict, many have been sending indirect support in the form of weapons and funding. This shows that many of the NATO countries value peace but are willing to fight against Russia in any way that will not escalate the conflict. Major sanctions have been placed on Russia, again highlighting the NATO countries' need to solve the conflict peacefully. Russia's central bank assets have been frozen, a sum totaling $630 billion in foreign currency reserves, according to BBC. And despite wanting to solve the conflict peacefully, according to NATO deterrence and defense policy, when one member country is threatened, all member countries are responsible to provide military aid because it is considered a threat against every sovereign nation. My third contention is that if Finland and Sweden become NATO members, Russia would be forced to abandon any further advancements into Eastern Europe. As I just said, any country who joins NATO pledges to unite their military forces with the other members in case of an invasion by a foreign power. This makes the positioning of Finland and Sweden a valuable asset if Russia were ever to wage war against NATO. This is because, despite there being minimal incentive for Russia to invade either Finland or Sweden, these two countries are in a position that would put Russia at a great disadvantage were they to ever invade a NATO member. Their northern positioning across the Baltic Sea would make an invasion by Russia a challenging task. They would not only be a fortifiable stronghold, but also a great base to launch operations against Russia in Eastern Europe. The membership of Finland and Sweden would make it possible to launch a naval invasion of the northern coast of Europe from Estonia to Poland, which, in an all-out war between the two factions, would be a flanking maneuver that could rout Russia's forces out of Eastern Europe. The tactical advantage provided by Finland and Sweden's membership in NATO would de-incentivize Russia from invading any NATO country, seeing as it would make winning such a war nearly impossible for Russia. In conclusion, Russia has proved that they are a threat to sovereign nations around the world and will only respond to strength. Thus, we must threaten strength in order to stop any further advancements of conflicts in Eastern Europe. Offering Finland and Sweden a membership into NATO would de-incentivize Russia from further expansion, as it would put Russia at a tactical advantage. Thank you.